Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from News Laundry.
Hello and welcome to News Laundry Interviews. Today we have a special guest in our studio, Mr. T.M. Krishna. Mr. T.M. Krishna is a Carnatic music vocalist. He is an author, he is an activist, and most recently he has written this wonderful book called Sebastian and Sons, which I'm going to show you. It's the story of the makers of the mridangam. The mridangam is a percussion instrument used in Carnatic music, a classical form of music. The instrument is made out of wood, and here's where the story lies: cattle skin, goat skin, buffalo skin, and cow skin. Carnatic music has come to be the preserve of the Brahmins. So, largely, it's the Brahmins who play the mridangam. But the Brahmins can't do the work required to procure and process cow skin, for that's what the caste system dictates, which means upper caste Hindus, the mridangam players, can't make the mridangam. Who does this work then? This supposedly impure work of cutting the cows and curing the skin. In Tamil Nadu, it's mostly Dalits, especially Dalit Christians. They make the tool that creates so much beauty, but do they benefit of it? Are they even recognized for their beautiful craft? This book has started a much needed conversation about the ugliness of caste, how it pervades every aspect of our lives, how it pervades even the most beautiful aspects of what it means to be a human being, which is art. We will be speaking to him about his work, about his book, and his role as an activist and a public intellectual. Mr. Krishna, so I'll start by congratulating you on your book. Like I said, it's been a much needed conversation starter.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So, like I said, the one aspect which I liked about this book is that it brings into stark relief this ugliness which underpins so much of what we consider beautiful about our world. Was that one of the reasons you wrote this book?
Well, I'm not very sure we start any project with like a reason specifically. This book came about because, I've been engaging with art and hierarchy and culture especially, and caste and gender. And what happens usually is when especially an upper caste man engages with that, somehow after a point we get this feeling that, we are this progressive people who have kind of understood, which is a whole load of crap. Because caste arrogance and gender arrogance is never going to go from me all my life. And I suddenly realized that I had completely forgotten the makers of instruments. I had spoken about caste in art and practice, in my own art form, Carnatic music, but in my purview, they never existed, which is just complete blindness to a very ugly reality, which again comes from the privilege of my caste and my gender and my complete obliviousness to this reality. And it's not like I'd never heard of them. I'd heard of makers, and mridangam makers specifically because they work with skin. And that completely changes the dynamics of how caste operates, right?
Yeah.
That's when I said, these are people we need to know about. This is their work we need to know about almost how they contribute to the world of what we celebrate in the sound that we call is all-pervasive and divine and beautiful. What lives like? What is their history like? And that's when the journey began of me starting with interviews with almost 5 generations of mridangam makers. Most of them Dalits, and one specific family, Christian Dalits.
Family, yes.
And there are other, what you could call in terms of government hierarchy, lower OBC communities also involved in this work.
So, what makes your voice more powerful than other people is usually when people write about caste issues, and even generally, they don't acknowledge their privilege. Usually these are people in op-ed pages, books, these are upper caste people, but you wouldn't know who they are unless, you are familiar with how surnames work and stuff like that. But in your case, that's your starting point. I come from this privilege, and now I want to talk about this. So is that a conscious decision?
Oh, it's absolutely a conscious decision. It's very important at many levels. Just like men who are feminists should always remember they are men.
They're men.
And that's never going to change how a feminist you are. I think people of upper caste, when they discuss caste, they must remember that fundamentally, let's look at it this way. I write this book. It's heralded as this wonderful book and this important book that is raising these questions. And T.M. Krishna benefits from this book. So is there a complete dichotomy here? Here is a book talking about marginalization of people, and an upper caste person comes and writes this book, and the upper caste person is again heralded as, this important person. Savior syndrome comes into my head. So in a way, I could be accused of perpetuating exactly what I'm challenging. So in order to keep that in check, it is very important for me to constantly remember that I'm privileged. And I have never experienced anything that I've written in this book. Okay? All I'm doing, as far as I'm concerned, is enabling a discourse. Okay? Shall we say, amplifying a voice or multiple voices. Now my job is to step back. Okay? I wish we were a far more beautiful society where I wouldn't be writing this book, and this book could be written by Mridangam makers, and they will have the same access and same reach as I have.
That's exactly what I was going to come to, because it's still your story of them.
No, it is.
It's not their own story.
I agree.
So how do we tear down these walls, these levels of narrative?
I mean, it's a very good point you made. So I had a chat with many Mridangam makers after the book had come out, and in the conversation I said, we were having this conversation about the book, and we're looking at translating it to Tamil, in other languages, Malayalam, Kannada, maybe other languages too, and was saying that, you should write a book. Maybe your book will not agree with certain things I've written in this book. You will have a different perspective. And they're saying, yeah, we should think, we should talk about it. And so, yes, you're right. Yes, it is their voice in the book. I've quoted them verbatim. Nevertheless, it comes through the messenger boy of privilege, right? And therefore, it is problematic. And I want to acknowledge it is problematic. I'm not running away from it. But if this will then lead to a book written by Mridangam makers, which is going to lead to a larger conversation, it's not just about Mridangam makers. That's why this book is important.
Yes.
It's about all people marginalized, all those voices not heard, all those different people doing so many things whose knowledge is not even respected, which is not considered even wisdom. So I think if that generates multiple of these conversations and opens doors for multiple of people from these communities to actually say, TM Krishna, shut up.
Let us speak.
Fabulous. I think it's fabulous. If this book results in multiple people saying that we are going to write this book, nothing like it.
Another aspect that I found fascinating about your book is when I read it, so it's clear that there's this ugliness behind this beautiful art. But in a way, this beauty also invisibilizes that ugliness. And it happens in other contexts also. The cunning of politics invisibilizes this. The glamour of the film industry, for example.
Everything.
The glitz of the growing economy and stuff like that. But when you zoom into that picture, you still have these categories, you still have that ugliness there. You still have this caste privilege, you still have this underprivilege or no privilege at all. But when you look at those human interactions, like you talk about Mani Iyer and the Fernandez, those aren't as black and white. How do you make sense of that?
See, that is the most difficult part of discrimination. When I set out to write this book, I didn't know what I was going to write. Because this is the first time I'm writing a book where, all what I've written till now is been like my ideation, my observation. This is the first time I was writing a book where it was the voices and the people who were telling me the stories. And it evolved through like all the 30, 40 conversations that I had and the travels that I did. Now, what I learned most importantly is that discrimination exists in those gaps. It's not at all black and white, which is why it's so difficult to call, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like a door is shut and locked and the key is thrown away. The door is open, but it's like one of these swinging doors. The size of the door varies. Who enters, when they can enter, when they can't enter, we don't know. Suddenly one morning that door is completely open. Next evening the door is closed, the person has to knock 15 times and still will not come in. That is how messy discrimination is. You ask any woman about how she feels discrimination. Nobody has to open up and say a word.
Yes.
I will never understand that in our lives.
Very true. How she walks down the road
nobody said anything to you. You were also given tea. I was also given tea. We've heard this 100 times. But the woman knows there's a difference. Caste is exactly like that, which is why it baffles me sometimes when upper caste women feminists don't get it.
And there's caste
And they don't get
caste.
it, by the way. They don't get it. Okay. I'm like, if I said the same things in the context of gender discrimination, you feel it and you know it. So in this book, for example, there's this, what fascinates me about this book is also the fact that an unusual interaction is happening. Now, normally, interaction between an upper caste person, Brahmin, and a Dalit is usually transactional. Some function is being provided, money is paid, it's over. Okay? It's very unusual that an intimate relationship is created. Now, why is this intimate relationship created? Because you have something called the mridangam in between them. So the mridangam is like the catalyst for this very improbable relationship. Now, what is there in that relationship? It's intimate, it's dependency, it is requirement, but it also transcends that. There is affection, there is care, but there is also feudalism. That's where discrimination really survives, because you can never pick it. Because there's always an escape valve, an excuse you can give. And to me, that was the most fascinating part of this whole journey of how does one grapple with it. When Parland, for example, Fernandez is in Tamil is Parland. So when Parland stays all night when the Mridangam player Vaidyanathan passes away, and I've heard one story was that he was there at the crematorium all night. Now, why was he there? Was it because he loved him? Was it because it was feudal? Was it loyalty? What is it? What did he feel? The very fact that even after writing 340 pages of a book about Mridangam makers, I don't know how many of them felt. And this is the story of discrimination. I know how all the upper caste men felt. I don't know what was going on in their minds. And the other thing about any kind of an oppressive system is it makes the oppressed also part of the system.
Part of the oppression.
Absolutely.
And this is what I want to understand from your interactions with people, Mridangam makers, and from the other side also. How does it work? How do people internalize this dehumanization in a way?
Dehumanization is a word that you and I are using. Neither parties are using that word here.
Yes.
Neither the oppressor nor the oppressed. So it's like for the person who's let's put it, and I use that analogy in the book and I'll use it here. Look at our homes. We all have house help. Now we all say they are family. Are they family? No. But we love saying it, no?
Yeah.
We say it to everybody. In our home, she's been here for 30 years, she's family. But she's not family.
She's not, yes.
So, what is that? What's going on there? If we just look at that, why do we feel the need to say she's family? What do we feel emotionally? Why do we feel emotionally better about ourselves when we say that? What is that feeling of saying, I take care of that person's child's education? Or the fact that, in our house, we don't discriminate, everybody is the same, there's no limitations. But she's not going to come one morning to your house and go and just take a nap in your bed. She's not going to do it. You never told her don't do it. But she's not going to do it. She's not going to probably even sit on the sofa on the couch. She's family? No. How does she know what she should not do and what she can do? How does she know where that line of that family is? Is that line of the family the fact that you can have casual conversation with her? That she can tell you that she's having troubles with her husband at home, or that or that you take care of some other thing. So what is this familyness that both people feel? She also feels.
She also feels it.
Okay.
And you have this story about Mr. Iyer and Sebastian's sons. He would pay them for their basic needs and stuff, but he would still hold back their wages, their money. He wouldn't pay them, but they still felt that loyalty.
So exactly.
They were oppressed, they were discriminated, but they still felt that loyalty.
So that can be also, think of it this way. We're talking about that was probably 1930s and 40s, different era altogether also. So now you have, for the first time, people who were never even allowed on the street of that home.
Home, yes.
Now said, because they are Mridangam makers, that's the only reason they can even get to Mr. Vaidyanathan's porch. And then they had a room within Maniyar's house. Now, this is an access that never happens to anybody else around their homes. So there is a feeling that I have socially progressed to a point where I'm accepted in this household, in this upper caste Brahmin household. And for the Brahmin, it is like, look, I'm not like others. These people come into my homes. You see the ugliness on both sides that is actually holding it together.
Together, yes.
Right, completely. And both parties don't see it that way. Like the other trope they use is father and son. Right?
Most of them.
Everyone said father and son. And when I first heard it, it took me at least 6 months to understand it. Because it was repeatedly said, he's like, and everybody said, the maker said, he was like my father.
Like my father.
The player said, I treat him like a son. So we know it's not father and son. But then what is it? Why is that model being used? So what does the father and son model represent is what you have to understand. Okay?
Also, when we talk about these stories in this way, there was this relationship, the ugliness was still there. But let's look at this aspect of the relationship, the father-son relationship. They treated them kindly, or they were loyal to them. Aren't we in a way sort of romanticizing, if that's the correct word, romanticizing the cruelty of the whole
I am not
situation?
romanticizing, which is what I tried to break down in the book.
No, not you in particular. I'm saying usually when we talk about this discourse,
I agree,
this is how we frame it.
But that's why we frame it that way. Because we don't want to call it discrimination. That's precisely the point, actually. I agree with exactly what you're saying. The reason you use tropes like this, the reason you say father and son trope, okay, or for example, a sexually abusive father and daughter relationship is still hidden in that whole idea of this is love. So you use these tropes to legitimize discrimination and not talk about it. And that's how society hides things. That's how we hide things. By not allowing that to be part of a discourse, you use these models. Like, she's like my sister or he's like my brother. I mean, this like my is a way by which what is hidden behind is not discussed. The control power systems are not discussed. The favors on which such a system works
yes.
Or on the lines on which this system works. For example, can assertiveness from the maker, for example. Can a maker be assertive? No. Assertion means you're crossing that line. So all these are hidden within this notion of father and son. And how the father and son is played out is the father, in this case being the player, says that there is so much, basically what the person is saying is, I have given so much freedom in my home for this individual who would usually never get this freedom. Therefore, he's like my son. And the son says, I'm a person who's not usually even allowed this kind of access, this kind of proximity, and this kind of conversational closeness and a certain intimacy ever if I was just anybody. Now, because I am a maker, I am allowed this, and therefore he's like my father. This is what is not said.
True. So, but the thing is, the very nature of these, transactional nature of these relationships is what make them weak, which shows that they're fundamentally very weak. They stand on weak ground. Why you talk about Raja Manikam, how he pushed back against the system, and they had to accommodate him.
Yeah.
Because they needed him. And this is the same when you talk about purity. I mean, that's such a huge concept. The whole idea of Brahmanism in a way rests on the idea of purity. Absolutely. But when it benefits them, they're not averse to slaughtering cows. They're not averse to...
Well, I'm not slaughtering the cow, right?
No. I mean, in a way, they're okay with it. Somebody else does it for them, they're fine with it.
Exactly why.
And they're playing with that cow hide because it benefits them personally.
Yeah.
So that idea of purity stands only as long as it benefits them personally. When they have to compromise with it, they compromise with it. So there's no principled position on which it stands.
Purity is never a principled position. It's never been a principled position. It's a position of moral high ground which has absolutely no democratic value. This is the truth. And purity is a way of constantly establishing superiority of oneself. That's it. And therefore purity is always a moving target. And sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's over, depending on how much it benefits my position. Okay? So even now, when we raise this whole issue of cowhide being used for the mridangam, I have heard people come and say, no, but it's not killed for the mridangam, right?
Yeah.
So if there were no beef eaters in the world, we would not be using cow hide. How silly that argument is. Or the other argument is, no, we don't really kill. We use dead animal skin, which is a lie, which is an outright lie. Okay. So then again, so you want to hold on to this sense. So then the purity has grades. Now, here you're holding on to the notion of purity of saying, since it is not killed for the use of skin for the mridangam, I am still pure. But a beef eater is not pure because it is killed for him to eat. So now there is a grade of shade that you brought to purity, right? That's a compromise because you want to find legitimacy in it. At the same time, if a person was eating beef right in front of you over lunch table, you will not sit there.
You will not sit there. True.
Okay, because you want to dissociate. So purity is a lie. Purity always means that some ugliness is being hidden. Always. Every kind of purity demands that something very ugly is hidden. And let's remember, when I say ugly, it's not just about the thing, but it's about people. You hide the people who are doing that work. You hide their lives. You hide their difficulty. You hide the story of the slaughterhouse. You hide the skinning of the cow skin, taking the flesh out, taking the fat out, making, their homes stink of fresh skin odor for days, so that you can smell good
That's
on
what you
the
talk
concert
about
stage.
in the book also. They would let them in their homes to repair the instrument, but the cutting part, the killing part
today,
was
by
had
the
to be
way,
done far
until
away.
today, okay, we all know what kind of work will be permitted in the home of a mridangam player and what kind of work is not. Both need not discuss it, everybody knows. So until a certain point, the work is done either at the mridangam maker's home, or first initial work is done near the slaughterhouse, then in their house. Part of it is brought probably now to their shops, but not to the homes of the players.
Yes.
It's all understood. And in fact, they will tell mridangam players, you don't need to know all this. I've heard makers tell players, why do you want to know all of it? So because they also are protecting, they have become part of that whole oppressive system, so they are protecting the player from the ugliness that they are part of. They're saying, no, you don't need to know all that.
Because that's the transactional nature of that relationship. It doesn't work otherwise unless you hide that ugliness.
Yeah, one maker says it in the book in the most beautiful fashion. He says, we are the people in between who make the impure pure. If you take us out, there is no purity. Just understand that whole system. That you need a person who is marginalized, who will categorize in this impurity argument, in order to transform something that is impure and give it to you as pure, so then you can worship it and keep it in your puja room and then play it in a concert stage and everybody says this is divine. My God, the profane and the divine, the profane and the profound. It's literally that.
Yes, and the related to this is the idea, you discuss it, you have talked about it elsewhere also, in the book also, the idea of high art.
Oh.
So a cultural elite in every society, not just in India, there's a class elite somewhere else, a cultural elite here, caste elite here, which are like very fluid categories.
Class is always a veneer for everything else.
No, what I'm trying to ask is, so there is this cultural elite which defines what high art is.
Yeah.
In this country, for example, the cultural elite is the Brahmin. He defines what high art is. And because they get to define that they are cultural elite because they have political power, intellectual power, economic power. If, for example, it wasn't thus, if Adivasis had the political power, the cultural power, the intellectual power, so they would have defined what high art is. So Carnatic music would have been
would not even be in the.
Yes.
We won't be having this conversation.
Exactly.
I would not. You wouldn't even know who I was.
Exactly. So no, what I'm coming to is, in that sense, we might go to the realm of philosophy here. In that sense, does art have any intrinsic value? How do we define what art is in that context?
Okay, first of all, words like high art, classical, folk are all just, in my opinion, very bluntly put, need to be thrown to the Bay of Bengal as fast as possible because they have no aesthetic meaning. And I'm willing to argue this ad nauseum with anybody. I will argue that my music is not classical, okay? Because that word has the qualities that we assume of Shastriya Sangeet, irrespective of whether it's Drupad, Khyal or Carnatic music or Western classical, name it. is there in so many art forms that we never call classical. And there is only one reason for it. The word high art and classical is determined by people who occupy the higher echelons of cultural space in a country. Their caste, in our country, it's caste.
It's caste.
And caste pervades every religion. So let's not think that it's only happening in the Hindus.
Yeah, that is the fundamental
So which is why I want to say,
country, yes.
I also want to say, because Khayal is also determined by the same Brahminical community. So the Brahminicalness of whether it is Khayal, Drupad or Carnatic music does not change. And like, okay, suppose there was an inversion. What would happen? Things would get inverted. So what is the role of art? Or what is art? Is art specific? Is art a power structure? Art is a power structure. Art is something that is determined by who's controlling, who is maneuvering, and who is presenting, who doesn't have the right to present. At the same time, the only reason I'm still singing is because I truly believe that beyond all this, there is something that art offers.
Some aesthetic value to it.
I do believe that. Let me put it this way. The only reason I'm asking these questions, is because I think that there is the possibility that occasionally, through the experience of art, which is literature or theatre or music, momentarily we become slightly better people. Momentarily. Those 10 seconds when you read that poem or those songs that you hear, when that happens, for me, the difficult questions emerge. Now, I don't want to say that experience is divine or pure. In fact, it's in those moments that you discover your own ugliness even more, is what I would like to say. If I could be slightly better for those 10 seconds, why can't I be better the rest of the times of my life? That's how my questions emerged. So does art have any intrinsic value? I think human beings discovered one thing. That the only way we can change, only way we can influence ourselves is emotionally, not intellectually. You can understand something, but you may not change because you understand it. You feel it and you will change. So I think art has a role. If we can move people, if we can move them a little bit, if tomorrow I've written this book, okay? So this is a work of art, it's literature. When everybody walks into a concert hall, the most privileged, looks at the mridangam and always now remembers the maker, isn't that a step forward? Isn't that a possibility? And if the mridangam players then redraft their relationships with the mridangam maker, maybe they want to know more about their families, isn't that a step forward? So I think art still has a role, but my point is it cannot have a role unless it is self-critical, which is why this book is important. I can't live in this bubble of saying, I'm divorced from all the temporal things that is happening. We create this rubbish, we create anything beautiful, man. Nothing. We are just human beings. Unless we grapple with what's happening around me, unless I go to East Delhi and see what happened there, there's nothing true about the songs that I sing, about the melody that I break. Every experience that you have is translated in every word you write, and every song that you sing, and every movement that you make. So the more real you are is when art is real.
Which brings me to you. You just came back from East Delhi. You've seen what's happening in the country. In this ugly political moment we live in right now, what should be the role of art? Or what is the role of art? Is it just this sort of a rose in a desert? It prettifies the place, it symbolizes hope. But in actual terms,
all that is crap.
In real terms, does it have any meaning? Does it have any value?
All this rose in a desert symbolizes is all crap. It's momentary panacea. That's all.
So what is the role of art then?
I think, in fact, I believe it has a very great role. And I think one of the things that in this country we have ignored tremendously is the fact that change is not a political thing, it's a cultural thing. And which is why art becomes very important. Which means faith, art, culture, rituals, whether it is, we have never engaged, especially the progressive world that we speak about, and I'd like to belong to the progressive world, is the fact that we have really not engaged with seriousness with the world of culture, faith and religion, and with respect, without condescension.
That, I believe, is one of the reasons the Hindutva
That's why I'm
ideology has
saying.
stolen a march on.
Oh, they always knew they were a cultural. That culture is where things
They
happen.
still say they're a cultural organization, even despite
RSS has said it even now.
Yeah.
And the fact is, we have never respected that aspect of our being. And I'm talking about traditions that are there in communities, songs that are there for generations. I know it's complicated. I know there's discrimination. I know there's gender, there's caste. Okay. But unless now that we are artists, we work in those spheres, unless we create more robust conversations within those spheres of faith.
And a language to address that.
Within those spheres of faith, within those spheres of cultural practice, ritual practice, those songs that are sung for 300 years, that may be problematic. But can we engage with the problems in it? Can we create new cultures? Can we create, the big problem today is that the right-wing bigots have created a chasm between democratic India and civilizational India. And we have allowed it to happen. So today they're almost saying 70 years of democratic India is a lie. It's a Western concept that was not at all Indian. Go to the past and see how perfect we were in antique India, which is basically saying Hindutva India. Why have you allowed this to happen? Why is that the progressive is not able to engage with cultures? And it was not that, but we never built a discourse around it. Why is that people see the progressive world as being an atheistic world? Whether you say it or not, these are messages that people feel. You speak about liberalism, they think that you're saying something against a religion. These are images, right? Let's not keep on saying we didn't say it. No, let's own up to the fact that we sent out these messages. Which is why I think artists, and I would say artists especially who are in the fields that are entrenched in cultural traditions of this country, play a very important role in asking difficult questions. And saying, I will sing Tyagaraja to my death. I will challenge him, but I will also sing him and I will celebrate him. I will ask him questions. I will make sure Tyagaraja is in my concert. I will make sure Perumal Murugan, a modern composer, is there. I make sure I'll sing about manual scavenging in my concert. This is what I very strongly believe. Discarding anything, denigrating anything, condescending anything doesn't lead to any conversation. Which is why art today is so important. It is not about just singing one song and saying we are brothers and sisters. Please. That's so shallow.
I have discussed this elsewhere. The Hindutva side, they have an argument. They have a powerful idea. It's a simple idea. It's a wild idea, but it's a simple idea. The idea is, this is a country of Hindus. It was great once, we'll make it great again. So what do you have to counter it? Like you said, the progressive side. They're talking about this, but outside of the circle of
that's
this
a fundamental
belief.
problem. How can you ever have I won't say a response or argument, I'll say how can you have a narrative when you have not even engaged with any
that
of
idea?
this? How can you have a narrative? The fact is the progressive world does not have a narrative today. I'm talking about a cultural narrative. I'm not talking about intellectually giving logic to it. That goes nowhere.
Logic doesn't work. We've been doing.
But what is the culture? What is the cultural narrative within the world of the progressive about the fact that we are in India where Muslims and the Hindus and the Christians and the Jews and the Parsis and the Buddhists and the Jains are intermingled culturally? Are also, when you say intermingled, it also means we are in conflict, it also means we are contesting each other, it also means there's a mess. What is our narrative? What is our song? Do we have even a song? No. How are we going to create a discourse between equality and, say, ritual? I mean, those two words will never come in one line. Either you discard ritual or you discard equality. But you can't. I'm saying can I create a paragraph that creates a conversation between equality and community ritual? How do we do it? Can I create a song about it? Can I question it? So we are really completely in new territory now. And we have to recognize we are starting right at the scratch.
So what do we do? How do we start it?
Well, I try to do it through my music, through what I do and through my writing. Because I think, everything I say here is challenging every Brahminical value. Okay? Which is a national problem. It's not a specific Mridangam player, Mridangam maker problem. It's a national problem. Let's also be honest and say that this whole country, right from independence, has showcased to the world only Brahminical India as Indian culture.
Because that's the hegemony, cultural hegemony.
We have never
art
changed
has.
that.
Yes.
So let's be also honest to accept that we laid the foundational work for the RSS and the BJP to basically build a huge building out of it. Okay? So now we are saying, I'm saying now I write this book. Okay? But I sing in also Brahminical spaces. I'm not saying I will not sing in Brahminical spaces. I do sing in Brahminical spaces. I also sing in completely non-Brahmin places. I sing texts which are completely disconnected to these cultures, texts that are part of these cultures. And I said Tyagaraja specifically because he's an epitome of Brahminism. I disagree with the man, I also love the man. That's the magic of complicating. See, it's very important that we bring back nuance. Nuance is not high culture word. Nuance is how most people live their lives. We don't call it nuance, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the problem is, like you said, we are in different territory now. Right now in East Delhi, 20 miles from where we are staying. So there's communal violence, and there's this one side, there's a Hindu mob, and there's Muslims. They attack Muslims. The police sides with the mob. The administration is with the mob. The last hope of the masses in this country, the judiciary, is nowhere on the scene. So if there's this Muslim youth there who sees all this, who suffers all this, and then we tell him about nuance, then we tell him about cultural pushback against this thing when he's facing an existential threat, what do we tell him? How does he react to this? How does he push back against this?
Okay, I mean there are different mechanisms for different situations. So there's a long term and there is the immediate. We have to be working with both. But why I said what I said was because we always seem to be forced to be working only with the immediate. That's part of the right-wing strategy, to not give you time to think of something larger and think for something for 2 decades. So I think in such situations...
Sorry to interrupt here, but that thinking long-term is also privilege, right?
Of course
you can think long-term.
No, I was going to
finish.
finish.
For a Muslim man there,
I'm not asking that person to
yes.
think for long time. I'm saying that, of course, thinking long-term is privilege, but you need to also create a context for the possibility of everybody participating in that discourse.
Yes, of course.
But before that, you need to also respond to the immediate. Okay. There's no point now going to East Delhi and me having this conversation. Today is not the place for it. Today is a place to say, okay, how can we get back to the place where the 3 Muslim houses which were surrounded by Hindu houses still feel safe about where they are? Can we get there? That is step 1. Okay? Can they still feel that they can live there again? Can the sweets be shared again? Can that semblance of normalcy be recovered in some sense? So that is the stage 1 of beginning a discussion in that environment. But my point is, let's not get stuck only there, because that still remains at the surface level and can be poked at any point of time. Because 2 years later, you will find another situation where you will have a set of mobs who want to create a riot, who will just trigger it again, right? So our problem is we've always been only looking at those solutions that are momentary, that goes back to, okay, things seem to have settled, right? Now we need to get to that point. First, can we get to that point? I don't know, okay? I don't know. Where we are today, things are happening every day. How does one grapple with it? I really don't have an answer to that question. But if we can get to that point, even specifically, say, to East Delhi, let's talk about one location, then can we not stop and say, okay, it's over? Can we then say, how do we build truly an egalitarian community there? What do we do to conversations about culture? Because those ruptures are not gone. Ruptures still are there. Yes. So the question is here. This is where cultural long-term discourse is important. This is where it can't be a privileged discourse of me deciding what happens in East Delhi. So it's important then to say, can we have a larger conversation with community there? Look at the ruptures there. Create a cultural discourse that can slowly, step by step, take that community to deeper involvement with each other's lives. So that this rupture is much harder. And therefore, it's much harder for somebody to break it. The problem is, we never go to that level of the discourse at all. We've always stopped at saying healing. Healing is not where the solution is.
Do you think one of the reasons that doesn't happen is because the most effective way to bring about change, to address these issues, is to have movements? The most effective, obviously, is a political and cultural movement, socio-political cultural movements. Do you see anything like that on the horizon in India right now?
Right now, no. Truth is this, right now, no. Which is why I said we are constantly in reactive mode. So how are we going to continue to react and respond, yet find time to, few things that I've done in the years is try to create cultural conversations, especially in spaces that are marginalized. I mean, I have not tried, I'll correct myself. We as a group have. And one of the most interesting part of anything that is when we go there as people who know nothing, because we know nothing. Okay, so when you go to a place and you're saying that we're trying to create a cultural conversation, first go with the position of saying you know nothing. That is starting from there, and that admitting that just because you have written reams about it or you intellectualize about it, you really don't know anything. So when we go there, I can tell you the most robust conversations we have had with young people, with ideas of saying, okay, if you're going to have a cultural event here, a cultural celebration, what are the stigmas around this place? What are the issues around this place? And what is culture here? And it's been learning. And that then evolves in more conversations and curations and saying, I remember when in one section of Chennai, when we did a festival, collectively did a festival there, I was standing in the street, it was a street festival. One guy came and said, sir, which party? So I said, what party? He said, which party? So I said, no party. He said, this is a cultural event. I said, yeah. I said, which party? Get what he's saying? That's an area where there would be no just art festival. If there was any singing, it meant that there was a speech after that by some political outfit. Now, that was the first time that area was having just a celebration of art, of diverse art, celebrating their own art forms, their own culture, their own food, also introducing them to art forms that they have never experienced, which they said, we've never seen this in our place. So now all this evolved. It was just an event, 3-day, 2-day event, but evolved from conversation from people there. And said, here we have Muslims, they sing these songs. We have Christians, we do this. We have this. In our community, the women do. Now, that is how you must evolve a conversation of culture.
But again, for this to work, for this to actually change society, actually change perceptions, you have to have power. That conversation, that narrative has to have power. And right now in this country, the most effective way to have power is to have political power. So how do you take those cultural conversations, those cultural movements, make it part of a political process which can take power and then take it from there?
I'm not entirely convinced that you need political power for it. Okay, I'm not entirely convinced by it. I do agree that it is important. I am of the belief that, first of all, we don't know how. I'm just giving you ideas, first of all. And we have done it in a little places. I think we need tons of experiments across this country, in different mohallas, in different village clusters. We need people to do little experiments of how can we actually build these, and they're very geographical and culturally specific,
Yes.
Please remember that there's no
and
one...
This is a continent of a country,
exactly.
So that's going to happen.
So first of all, I think we need to first try these conversations, art conversations, culture conversations, in different parts of this country, okay? I agree with you that political momentum is what can make it grow. But and when you say political, I presume you mean party political specifically, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay. So, but I think that is stage 2 or stage 3 of this. Right now, we need to function like cultural organizations. See, we call this country secular. We use these words. Who understands this word? Even we don't understand it.
It's actually become a term of abuse now, secularism.
So exactly. Yeah. I mean, we also have to go to the fact is our education system is entirely messed up. Our education system is a casteist system because private schools and public schools is a caste framework. We never address it. The most odd thing is we expect our children who study in private schools and come after 12 years studying with the same kind of people to understand caste and be progressive. What rubbish. I'm just giving examples of all the places where this problem exists. So while I agree with you that political movement or political support for this is important, I think initially we need first little social experiments in different parts of this country for this to happen. And these need to be in places where there is no immediate threat. I'm specific about that because those places are a different kind
That's
of a
a
boiling
different
point.
conversation, yes.
But if we can find, say, 10, 15 places in the country, and doesn't need the same people, different people, and say, what are the discourses? How can we build these discourses? And then we can knit it together as a possibility. Then we are going somewhere with it. I mean, I don't understand how after 70 years of independence, how many children in this country know properly a song in every religion. How many children? None. Very few. Very few. How many of us have truly celebrated as children, you know? So we have to think of these things. I think we need little culture schools, culture hubs, where multiple communities, and through caste and gender, and come and celebrate constitutional values in a way that is just art. Because these things have to be imbibed inside the skin, you know. They have to be imbibed in a way that you can't remove, that you can't take out. So we really need to attempt this, especially I think a lot of this also has to be focused. I am very worried about the younger generation. I'm extremely worried that that fabric has changed. Has it? I don't know. Has it changed forever? I mean, what happens to next two generations? Are they thinking in a different manner today? Yes, there are also positives to it because a lot of young people are on the streets today and asking difficult questions. But at the same time, the polarization is also real. So I don't know.
I mean, there are pictures, and I mean, people have seen on the ground the writers in East Delhi. Some of them were just 13, 14-year-old kids. Exactly. That's a scary thing.
So, I mean, those are the things that worry me deeply. Governments come and go. Governments come and go. But again, what happens to our nature? What happens to our being? I mean, the very fact that today we constantly say somebody was killed, but I have, in the last how many days, I've never heard anybody say this person was killed. Just not acceptable. This person was killed, but you know.
We'll leave it at that ponderous note. But before I let you go, one last question. It's a bit of a technical question. You are seen as this innovator who is sort of trying to reshape, mold these traditions. And even your bio on the book, it says...
I didn't write it.
I'm sure. Uncommon in his rendition of music and original in his interpretation of it, he is at once strong and subtle, manifestly traditional and stunningly innovative. So for us Philistines who don't know the intricacies of music, what does that exactly mean?
Can I read it again?
Yes, please.
Okay, so without my glasses. His rendition of music, original is interpretation. Oh, okay. This could mean the following. Well, so many people ask this question, do I sing traditional music? You know, for example, am I against tradition? Because there are a lot of people who think that I've thrown tradition under the lorry. Or am I this innovator? These are all just tags, and you know, it sounds nice when it's read. That's why it's written.
But what does it mean?
But it basically means, I
actuality?
mean, I don't think I can just explain it to you the way I understand it. I think that I would like to believe that the music that I attempt to sing has qualities of tradition, and I use tradition as a continuum, as something that is being carried forward. At the same time, challenges it. So the word innovation probably comes from that, of saying as a person who takes from the past, but does not accept the past. So challenges, and the challenges are the innovation. And challenges are the departures, parallel tracks. It could be in form, it could be in content, it could be in presentation, it could be in all that. So that's probably what it means. Subtle and robust, and yeah. So I think the important thing is tradition and innovation are taken to be contesting ideas. In my case, I don't see it that way. I think they're very, very much cohabiting ideas, right? So that is what it means by saying traditional and original.
In this particular case, I mean, tradition is also sort of a euphemism for Brahmanism.
Yeah.
So is it also sort of a challenge to that?
I mean, am I challenging Brahmanism? Of course.
In this particular...
So the whole question is this. Now, it again goes back to the other question, right? So, I mean, Brahmanism is extremely ugly. I mean, there's no argument in that. So, but... You asked the question intrinsically, is there anything in the music? Like, let's go back to that. So, of course, the music I sing is entrenched in Brahmanism. But there is also something else in it. That something else, which is continued through multiple threads, is the tradition that I think I can hold on to. For example, in the case of, say, Indian music, which is especially Carnatic or Khyal or Dhrupad, I think the idea of the raga, the idea of the tala, are to me the two essential items, essential aspects of the tradition that I think are very interesting and very aesthetically inspiring. So I use both those ideas. I don't discard them. At the same time, there are many things built around these ideas, which is filled and drenched in social hierarchy, social inequality, and in Brahminical systems that I completely reject. And there I need to depart. I need to reflect. I need to look back. I need to reinterpret. I need to find a way to say different things, keeping in mind raga and tala. And that's why you need to, I could very easily, for example, break everything down and not sing Carnatic music at all. You could ask me why. But I think it is important that you find a way of subverting something, but also allowing something to kick memory.
Sort of by rebelling from within the...
It is very important.
From inside.
It's very important. It is very important that you do both. You know what you're challenging. You're very clear about it. At the same time, you're not saying everything in the past, just like you don't say everything in the past is incredible and hunky-dory. So everything in the past is also not something that needs to be discarded. There are elements that you can say, you remember this element, don't you? But all this is ugly. All this is ugly.
Let's take the best parts and leave the ugliness.
This ugly. But there is this. Kamboji is a lovely melody. We can let Kamboji tell stories that is never told before. We can use Adi Tala to interpret itself in a way that it has never been interpreted before. Adi Tala can be a part of telling the story of the manual scavenger. That's the game. All right,
we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Patience.
No problem. Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks, Satan.